April 14th, 1944. Outside Cassino, Italy. A cold morning mist clings to the shattered hillsides, carrying the smell of burned fuel and the metallic bite of wet earth. German Hauptmann Victor Eberhardt, commander of a battered Panzer IV platoon, wipes grime from his goggles as he climbs onto the turret of his tank. Below him, the valley is quiet, too quiet, except for the distant rumble of engines echoing off the stone ridges. He stiffens. There is again a low, rolling thunder building in the distance, like a storm approaching across the plains. His radio operator, Feldwebel Klausritter, looks up from a hatch. "Shermans again," he asks. But Victor doesn't answer. He's already raising his binoculars. Through the drifting fog, long before any silhouettes appear, he hears the unmistakable clatter. Tracks grinding over rock, transmissions whining, engines revving with that deep, throaty American growl. The sound is familiar now. Too familiar. They had destroyed 12 in 2 days. And yet here they come again, as if nothing had been lost. He finally spots them. At first, just shadows in the mist. Then shapes. Then an entire line, no, multiple lines, of olive-drab hulls rolling forward in perfect formation, their white star insignias glowing faintly beneath the gray sky. "Impossible," Victor mutters under his breath. He had watched 3 of those very same Sherman units get torn apart by German guns the previous afternoon. He had seen the fires, the ammunition cook-offs, the columns of smoke rising like funeral pyres. The Americans should have been set back for days, maybe weeks. Yet now the valley quakes under the arrival of a fresh armored company, as if conjured overnight. Ritter leans out of the hatch, eyes wide. Where are they getting them all? Victor lowers the binoculars slowly. He has no answer. The familiar weight settles in his stomach. Not fear exactly, but something colder, something practical. The sense of a problem that is growing faster than anyone on their side can explain. The Allied infantry accompanying the tanks begin pouring down the slopes in disciplined waves. Rifles press his shoulders, boots sinking into mud. The Shermans spread out behind them, turrets rotating as if sniffing the air for threats. Victor watches the valley transform. One moment, it's a quiet, shattered battlefield. The next, it's alive with movement, American machinery rolling with a confidence that feels almost arrogant. He remembers the last briefing from division headquarters, a reassurance. The Americans cannot replace armor losses as fast now. Their supply lines are stretched. The situation is stable. Yet here, on this quiet Italian morning, that statement looks laughably untrue. Victor hops down from the turret and lands in the mud with a splash. He pulls off his gloves and slaps them against his thigh, trying to focus. "Get the guns ready," he orders. "Prepare armor-piercing. They'll reach the riverbank in minutes." But as his crew scrambles, he pauses, because something else gnaws at him. He counts. 1 Sherman. Then another. 5, 10, 18, then more shapes emerging behind them. It's not a platoon. It's not even a company. It's a small battalion worth of armor. And every one of them looks fresh from the factory. Clean lines, new stowage packs, fresh paint, crisp markings. Tanks that look like they rolled straight out of America and onto the Italian battlefield. Victor exhales slowly. This isn't just reinforcements. This is replacement, total replacement, of losses that should have taken weeks to replenish. Ritter climbs back into the tank and speaks into the intercom. Looks like they brought friends. The crew chuckles nervously, but Victor doesn't. He steps back onto the turret and looks one last time down the valley as the Sherman force fans out, each vehicle drifting into position with mechanical certainty. He can no longer pretend this is normal. Something else is happening. Something bigger than this quiet valley. Bigger than Cassino. Bigger than the entire Italian campaign. The Americans are not just fighting. They are manufacturing war at a scale the Germans have never seen. And as the ground trembles louder, Victor feels it. The first whisper of a realization that will soon spread across the entire German command. They cannot kill Shermans fast enough. The Americans will simply build more. And more. And more. He reaches for the turret hatch. "Mount up," he orders quietly. "We're about to find out how many they brought today." The Panzer engine roars to life. The battlefield wakes. The valley prepares to burn. Victor drops into the turret, sealing himself inside the cramped steel belly of the Panzer IV. The familiar smell of oil, sweat, and cordite presses in around him. His headset crackles with voices, other platoon commanders, all seeing the same impossible sight on the valley floor below. Panzergruppe all call signs, someone reports. Enemy armor strength, significantly higher than expected. Significantly, that's one way to put it. Victor steadies himself as the tank lurches forward, tracks grinding over churned mud and shattered stone. Through the gun sight, Oberstreiter Weber watches the Shermans descend toward the river, their engines echoing to the valley like rolling thunder. They're not even cautious, Weber mutters. Why would they be? Victor answers. They know they can afford losses. The Panzer's 75mm gun elevates, the breech clanking shut as Weber makes final adjustments to his sight picture. Outside, the morning fog lifts just enough to reveal the full American formation. Shermans leading, infantry weaving between them, armored bulldozers moving behind to clear debris. It looks coordinated, practiced, overwhelming. Targets in range. Weber calls out, "Fire!" The first shot cracks the valley like a whip. The recoil slams through the Panzer's hull. Victor watches through his periscope as the shell streaks across the field and explodes against the glassy plate of the lead Sherman. Armor fragments burst outward. Flames lick from the hatches. One Sherman down. But immediately, the tank behind it rolls around the burning wreckage and keeps advancing, turret pointed forward, as if the destroyed machine never existed. Ritter exhales sharply. They don't stop. They don't even hesitate. Another Panzer IV fires. Another Sherman erupts in flames. But again, replacements step forward to fill the line. It feels like trying to stop a river with bare hands. Machine gun fire rattles across the valley as American infantry push forward. Artillery whistles overhead and lands with deafening blasts behind the German line. The air turns into a thick haze of smoke, dust, and the bitter tang of propellant. Victor grips the edge of the turret ring. This isn't a company attack, he murmurs. This is an assembly line. Weber fires again. Another hit. But each kill only reveals more olive-drab hulks emerging through the smoke. 5 destroyed. 10 damaged. And still, the American advance doesn't slow. Inside the Panzer, the crew is sweating now. Not from fear, at least not yet, but from a growing unease that none of them want to voice. Are they pulling armor from another sector? Ritter asks. Reinforcements from Anzio? Naples? Victor shakes his head. No, these are new vehicles. Look at the tracks. Look at the paint. They're factory fresh. He's right. The Shermans look new. Not rebuilt. Not patched or scavenged. New. A realization begins to form. One so absurd he tries to push it away. Could the Americans really be sending brand new tanks across the ocean as fast as Germany can destroy them? Behind him, his radio crackles again. Static. Then the panicked voice of Lieutenant Meissner from a neighboring platoon. Eberhardt, they're flanking left. We've counted at least 20 more. 20? Where are they coming from? Victor opens his mouth to answer, but he can't. Because he doesn't know. Not yet, but deep in the American homeland, thousands of miles away, production plants in Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, and Philadelphia are roaring day and night. Each one capable of producing more tanks in a week than some German factories produce in a month. But Victor can't see that. All he sees is a horizon filled with Shermans that refuse to stop coming. His Panzer rocks violently as an American shell slams into a boulder beside them, spraying molten fragments against the hull. Sparks cascade down the turret like falling stars. Gun loaded. Weber shouts. Target ahead, left turret. Fire. Another Sherman takes the hit. Another fireball rises into bruised sky. And yet more tanks keep pouring forward. So many that Victor begins to feel something he has never felt in his years as a tanker. Not fear of the enemy's skill. Not fear of their tactics. But fear of their numbers. Fear of an enemy who can lose entire platoons by noon and replace them by sunset. The shot echoes. Smoke swirls. Shermans advance. And Victor finally speaks the thought he's been holding back. If this continues, he says quietly, we are fighting the wrong kind of war. Outside, another wave of American armor crests the ridge. Fresh paint, fresh tracks, fresh crews, an entire army built on a moving conveyor belt, and the Germans are standing in front of it. Smoke rolls across the valley as the firefight intensifies. Victor's Panzer shudders under the concussion of another near miss. He ducks instinctively as fragments ping against the turret armor like hailstones. The air inside the tank grows hotter, thicker, vibrating with every blast that shakes the earth outside. Weber grits his teeth and realigns the gun sight. They just keep coming. I can't. There's too many targets. Pick the ones closest. Victor orders. Slow them down. But slowing them down now feels like trying to slow an avalanche. The German line is beginning to buckle. Thin platoons of Panzer IVs and Stugs, already worn from weeks of fighting, struggle to blunt the sheer volume of American armor pushing into the valley. Each kill only momentarily dents the formation. Every knocked-out Sherman is replaced by another one rolling confidently forward, cannon steady, turret humming. Then a sound cuts through the battle. Ritter's headset crackles to life with a new transmission. Hauptquartier and alle Panzerkommandanten. Headquarters to all tank commanders. Victor's eyes narrow. High command never broadcasts during active engagements unless something monumental has happened. The voice that follows is tense. Strained. This is Major Reinhardt. A courier from Army Group C has delivered urgent intelligence. Stand by. A moment passes, long enough for another American shell to detonate nearby, shaking the Panzer so hard Victor braces a hand against the turret ring. Sweat trickles down his temple. The air smells of burning rubber and scorched steel. Then Reinhardt continues, voice unsteady. Reports confirm Allied armor replacements in the Italian theater are arriving at rates far beyond previous assessments. Inside the tank, Ritter freezes. Reinhardt presses on. Field depots near Naples received over 120 Shermans in the past 48 hours. Weber stops adjusting the gun. 120? Ritter slowly turns toward Victor. That's impossible. But somehow it isn't. Reinhardt's voice grows more grim. Intelligence believes American manufacturing plants are producing armor at an estimated ratio of static. Then the number comes through, sharp and undeniable. 10-1 compared to German output. Silence fills the tank. 10-1. Victor closes his eyes for a moment, feeling the pressure of the words settle like lead in his chest. 10-1 is an advantage. It isn't even superiority. It's industrial domination on a scale no European nation has ever faced. It means that every Panzer they lose is irreplaceable, while every Sherman the Americans lose barely registers. Weber whispers, they can lose a battalion and replace it by tomorrow. Ritter adds quietly, and we lose a platoon and wait a month. But Reinhardt isn't finished. The Americans have reorganized their logistics. Replacement tanks are now shipped preloaded, pre-tested, and combat-ready from U.S. ports. They roll off the landing ships and drive straight into battle. Victor feels his stomach tighten. It explains everything. It explains the fresh paint, the untouched tracks, the way the Shermans appear in waves, as if the battlefield itself is generating them. America isn't only supplying an army. America is supplying a system. Then the final message arrives. All units conserve armor. Avoid unnecessary engagements with superior numbers. Hold defensive positions until reinforcements arrive. Weber laughs once, sharp, humorless. Reinforcements? With what tanks? With what fuel? Victor doesn't answer. He can't, because for the first time, he sees the war not as a sequence of battles, but as a race. And Germany is sprinting on broken legs, while America drives forward on endless conveyor belts of steel. Outside, the Shermans crest another rise, another fresh wave of green armor rolling forward with terrifying consistency. Earth trembles beneath their weight. Machine guns chatter. American infantry surge behind them, emboldened by the armor wall. Ritter's voice cracks. Hauptmann, what do we do? Victor's hands tighten around the periscope grips. We fight, he says, but understand this. He looks toward the sea of tanks, their silhouettes multiplying in the haze. We are fighting a machine that replaces itself faster than we can break it. Another American shell slams into the hillside, showering the Panzer with dirt and stone. Weber shouts, "Enemy armor closing fast." Victor takes a breath, a deep one, and for the first time, he feels the true weight of the truth. They are not losing this battle because they lack skill, or courage, or training. They are losing because the enemy's factories, thousands of miles away, are deciding the outcome. And those factories never sleep. The ground trembles again as another wave of Shermans surges forward. Victor steadies himself against the turret frame, feeling the vibration run up his arms like the heartbeat of some great metal beast approaching through fog. A roar of engines echoes across the valley. 30, maybe 40 vehicles moving in synchronized advance. Weber's voice breaks the moment. They're pushing right through the center. They're not even spreading out. They're just driving. Because they can afford to. Because losing 5, 10, even 20 tanks in the opening minutes doesn't change their strength. Victor swallows hard. Traverse right, Weber. Target the leading Sherman. On it. The Panzer's turret groans as it swings. Through the gun sight, Weber lines up the shot. The enemy tank is close now. So close Victor can almost make out the crew silhouettes behind the thick glass of the vision blocks. Fire. The round slams into the Sherman's lower hull. Flames erupt, black smoke spiraling upward. For a moment, the advancing line hesitates. For a moment, then another Sherman pushes forward to fill the gap. Followed by 2 more behind it, all of them rolling over the burning wreck as if it were nothing more than a campfire. Ritter curses under his breath. This isn't a tank battle. It's a conveyor belt. Outside, the German infantry line breaks under the pressure of the armor wave. Men scatter between rocks and shell craters, diving for cover as the Shermans fire high-explosive rounds into their positions. The hillside ignites with orange flashes, churning earth into clouds of dust and debris. Victor hears another voice through the radio, Oberleutnant Krauser, commanding a Stug battery to the south. "We can't hold. They're overrunning our flank. I count at least 25 Shermans and more coming over the ridge. We need anti-tank guns, air support, anything." Static replies. No promises. No reinforcements. Victor closes his eyes for a heartbeat. He imagines, just for a moment, the factories thousands of kilometers away. Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, cities that he's never seen but now controls his fate. He imagines assembly lines stretching for kilometers, rows of welders, machinists, men and women working around the clock as fresh steel plates slam into place with mechanical rhythm. Every 12 minutes, another Sherman rolls forward. Every hour, 5 more join the queue. Every day, dozens leave the factory gates. Every week, hundreds board ships, already fueled, armed, tested. He can almost hear the factory floor. The thunder oppresses, the hiss of welding torches, the endless progression of tanks on moving rails. And then he opens his eyes to the battlefield and sees the result. A Sherman rumbles over a stone wall, crushing it beneath its tracks. Another swings its turret toward the German line and fires, sending a shockwave that rattles Victor's teeth. The valley is now a sea of advancing armor, a tide he knows they cannot turn back. "Weber!" Victor shouts. New target, left flank. Fire when ready. The Panzer fires again. Another Sherman goes up in flames. But now, Victor barely watches the explosion. The kill doesn't matter. Not really, because 3 more tanks appear through the smoke almost instantly. His gunner sees it too. It's like they replaced everyone we knocked out since dawn. Ritter swallows hard. They have. A heavy thud hits the Panzer side. The crew jolts as paint chips shower inside the hull. Another hit, this time on the frontal armor, sends a metallic screech through their bones. We're taking fire from 3 directions. Weber yells. Victor looks through the periscope. The Shermans are beginning to encircle them. It's happening fast. Faster than the Germans can redeploy. Faster than reinforcements can arrive. Faster than anyone expected. The American advance is not a charge. It's not even a military maneuver. It's a physical manifestation of an industrial empire bearing down on them. Ritter's voice trembles for the first time. Hauptmann, we can't stop this. We can't stop them. Victor feels the truth settle in his chest like a weight of iron. This is no longer a question of battlefield tactics. No longer a matter of who fires first, who flanks better, who outmaneuvers whom. This is a test of metal versus metal, production versus production. And Germany, no matter how skilled its crews or deadly its panzers, is being crushed beneath the steel tide of an enemy that can replace every loss 10 times over. Another explosion rocks the battlefield. Another Sherman swings toward them. Victor grips the periscope, steadying himself as the Panzer shakes again. Hold your fire, he says quietly. Wait for them to close. Weber hesitates. But do as I say. Because Victor knows the truth now. This battle will not be won by destroying tanks. It will be survived, if it can be survived at all, by fighting smarter, closer, and with the precision of crews who have no replacements waiting behind them. The Shermans continue their relentless approach. The German line begins to crumble, and the roar of American industry echoes across the valley like a storm that will not end. The Shermans draw closer, their engines snarling through the smoke-thick air. Victor watches them advance with a grim understanding of a man who has already seen the end of the battle, but not yet reached it. The Panzer's turret ticks steadier now, the movement more deliberate. They are about to enter the only realm where a smaller force can still claw for survival. Close range. Weber, Victor murmurs, switch to hollow charge. They'll be inside 100 meters soon. Weber nods, grabbing the next shelf in the rack as Ritter braces himself against the radio compartment. The tank rocks again as a Sherman shell explodes nearby, showering mud across the vision blocks. Outside, the battlefield transforms from distant shapes and silhouettes into a swirling chaos of metal and men. American infantry sprint from crater to crater, yelling orders through the haze. Mortar rounds thump into the earth behind the German ridge. Sherman cannons flash in the smoky half-light like brief white suns. The Shermans are close enough now that Victor can hear the rattle of their .50 cal machine guns. Close enough to see the glint off their commanders' periscopes. Close enough to feel the ground shudder with every turn of their tracks. Inside the Panzer, the crew steels themselves. 70 meters, Weber announces. Ritter wipes sweat from his brow. If they reach 50, switch to point-blank fire. They won't reach 50, Victor replies. Not if he can help it. He plants one boot against the turret ring, leaning forward to watch the Shermans through the narrow slits of the periscope. The enemy tanks fan out, covering each other, turrets swiveling like predators searching for prey. For a brief moment, just a moment, the Shermans slow as they hit a patch of uneven terrain. Their advance tightens. Their formation compresses. Now, Victor whispers. Weber, now. The Panzer fires. At this range, the 75mm shell doesn't arc. It punches. It slams straight to the angled side of the nearest Sherman, the explosion ripping the turret hatch open like a kick door. Flames bloom outward, rolling black smoke into sky. Before the fireball is fully formed, Weber is already loading again. Another Sherman tries to swing its turret toward them. Weber, second target. Loaded, firing. The second shot hits the Sherman's mantlet, jarring the turret sideways. The enemy tank jerks, smoke billowing from its gun. The crew inside scrambles. Victor sees helmets, a frantic hand. But the vehicle goes still. 2 down. Ritter breathes. But Victor doesn't celebrate, because he sees what's behind them. More Shermans, 3, 6, maybe more, pour around the burning tanks. They simply shift lanes, push forward, step over the wrecks like soldiers stepping over fallen comrades. How many? Weber mutters. How many can they possibly have? Victor grips the periscope tighter. Enough. A Sherman swings into position barely 60 meters away and fires. The shell slams into the Panzer's right side with a deafening crunch. The tank jerks violently, metal groans, paint peels, bolts rattle loose. Hit! We're hit on the starboard side. Ritter shouts. Damage! Victor demands. Side skirt blown off, but hull intact. They are lucky. Too lucky. Traverse left. Victor commands. They're circling us. Weber cranks the turret, shouting as he pushes the heavy mechanism. The Panzer turns, shuddering as mud cakes the tracks. Through the thick haze, Victor sees American infantry closing in behind the tanks, rifles raised, moving carefully, using the Shermans as rolling cover. Distance 45. Weber warns. Victor inhales sharply. This is it. This is the range where everything becomes personal. Weber, fire when ready. The Panzer barks again, the hull rocking backward. The third Sherman bursts into flame, thrown sideways by the blast. But now return fire is instantaneous. A shell whistles past the Panzer's bow, smashing into a boulder and sending earth raining onto the hull. Another ricochets off the frontal armor with a shriek of metal. We're pinned. Ritter shouts, "We need to move now." Victor replies with a calm he does not feel. "Driver, reverse 10 meters. Angle us toward the ridge." The Panzer lurches backward, grinding over shattered stone. Every meter counts. Every meter buys them seconds to survive. As the tank repositions, Victor sees something through the smoke that freezes his breath. An entire second wave of Shermans climbing the ridge beyond the first. Not damaged, not soot-stained. Fresh hulls, fresh tracks, fresh crews. It is the single most demoralizing sight he has ever witnessed. Ritter whispers, voice breaking, "How can they still have more?" Victor answers softly, almost to himself. Because for every tank we destroy here, 10 more are already being built. Another American shell slams into the earth near their left track, blasting dirt and stone across the hull. Weber grabs the next round with trembling hands, loading it with a grunt. "Ready," he calls. But Victor doesn't give the order yet, because something changes. The sound of engines, more than before, growing louder behind the smoke. Massed, organized, relentless. The Shermans are repositioning. They aren't just pushing forward anymore. They're maneuvering to encircle the ridge entirely. Victor wipes grime from his brow, heart pounding. "Boys," he says quietly, "prepare for the worst." They're not stopping. Outside, the steel tide closes in. August 9th, 1944. South of Falaise, Normandy. A dry wind swept across the French fields, carrying with it the distant thunder of artillery and the rumbling growl of engines, Allied engines. Thick dust drifted over the horizon, blurring the shapes of advancing tanks until they appeared as moving silhouettes in the evening haze. Oberst Hans Reimann raised his binoculars, wiping the lenses with a shaking hand. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows behind him, stretching over burned hedgerows and smoking truck carcasses. Around him, what remained of the 2nd Panzer Division scrambled to reposition, men running, shouting, shoving spent shell casings aside. The air tasted of cordite and exhaust. "Herr Oberst," a junior officer said, voice cracking under the strain. "The Panzers are repositioned along the ridge. But we only have—" He hesitated, swallowing hard. "We only have 2 functional Panthers left." Reimann didn't respond. He didn't need to. His binoculars told the full story. Down the valley, Shermans were coming again. Not 2, not 5, an entire line, 30, 40, more. He couldn't even count them before more rolled into view behind the first wave. The retreat from Normandy was turning into a nightmare. Behind him, a Panther gunner muttered a prayer as he slammed another round into the breech. The loader's hands trembled. "Sir," the gunner whispered, "we destroyed 5 this morning alone. 5. And they have brought 50, Reimann replied quietly. Another officer jogged up the ridge, gasping. "Command reports that the Americans replaced every Sherman lost in the last 48 hours. They're just rolling them off boats at Cherbourg." Reimann closed his eyes. He had spent his entire career fighting in the East, facing T-34s rushing across endless fields. But this was different. The Soviets had numbers, yes, but the Americans had something more dangerous: industrial momentum. Panthers were technical marvels, sleek, deadly, engineered with precision. But each one took weeks of skilled labor, rare materials, and constant maintenance. Shermans? They were being stamped out like appliances, In the distance, one of the Shermans hit a mine. Its left track snapped, the tank slewing sideways in a plume of smoke. Before Ryman could even exhale, 3 more Shermans maneuvered around it, engines roaring, guns leveling as if the battlefield had simply shrugged and moved on. A machine that couldn't be stopped. "Sir!" The radio operator shouted from the half-track, panic in his tone. "Reports from the south. Another American armored column is pushing toward Argenton. They say hundreds of vehicles." Hundreds? Ryman lowered the binoculars, the weight of reality finally sinking into his bones. This was not a battle anymore. This was a closing door. "Tell everyone prepare to withdraw," he said softly. "We can't hold against an army that replaces tanks faster than we can report them destroyed." As the sun dipped low, the Shermans crested the far ridge, perfect rows of olive-drab steel advancing with terrifying calm. Their engines rumbled like an approaching storm. Their tracks chewed up the earth with mechanical confidence. A Panther fired. The shell streaked across the valley and slammed into the lead Sherman, blowing its turret askew. A cheer rose, and then died, because the line didn't stop. It didn't hesitate. Another Sherman simply pushed forward to fill the gap. Ryman felt his heart drop. It was in that moment, standing on that ridge above the smoking fields of Normandy, that the truth solidified. Germany was no longer fighting an army. They were fighting an assembly line. He turned to his men, dirty, exhausted, terrified, and forced courage into his voice. "Fall back, now, before they surround us." Behind him, the Shermans advanced like a rising tide, their silhouettes glowing in the fading light, their engines humming in relentless unison, and the German retreat began. August 10th, 1944. Dearborn, Michigan. While German officers scrambled through dust and fire on the retreat from Normandy, the scene on the other side of the world could not have been more different. The Ford River Rouge complex roared with life. Steam hissed from pipes overhead. Chains clattered. Sparks rained from welding torches like artificial lightning. The smell of hot steel and machine oil filled the air as thousands of workers, men and women, young and old, moved in perfect mechanical rhythm. A foreman with rolled-up sleeves and soot-blackened hands raised his voice over the thunder. "Move that hull down the line. Let's go. Station 14 needs it in 5 minutes." On the assembly track, a Sherman hull glided forward, guided by workers whose motions were quick but practiced. One lifted a torch, sealing armor plates with a hiss of flame. Another tightened bolts. A third wiped sweat from his brow and signaled for the crane operator. Above them, a massive crane lowered a 75mm gun turret into place. It settled onto the hull with a booming finality that echoed across the factory floor. If a German tank crewman could have seen it, he would have been speechless. At the Panther factories back home, vast, quiet halls with too few workers and too little material. Each tank was practically handcrafted. Every weld was perfect, every internal part precise. Beautiful machines, yes, but slow, costly, fragile to repair. Here in America, tanks weren't built. They were assembled like refrigerators, like tractors, like automobiles. A production engineer in a crisp shirt and grease-stained tie checked his clipboard as tanks rolled past him in a line. "That's number 92 today," he called out. "Let's hit 100 before shift change." Behind him, a group of Rosie the Riveter workers exchanged tired but proud smiles. Across the factory, another assembly line was stamping out Continental R975 engines, air-cooled radial beasts originally designed for aircraft. Workers installed them with pneumatic tools, sealing them into engine bays with a speed that would have stupefied any German inspector. "You ever wonder where these are going?" a young mechanic asked as he wiped his hands on a rag. His supervisor grinned. "France, kid. And wherever those boys need him, every one we finish is one they don't have to fight without." Back in Europe, still the same day, 2 Sherman crews sat on crates near the beachhead at Cherbourg, watching fresh tanks roll off a Liberty ship. They looked like toys on a giant conveyor belt, trundling down the ramps one after another. A corporal shook his head in disbelief. "We lost our M4 outside St. Lo 3 days ago," he said, lighting a cigarette. 3 days. And command just hands us a new one like it's a spare pair of boots. His friend chuckled. Krauts must think we're made of tanks. In a sense, they were. Shermans were leaving American factories faster than Germany could gather the raw materials to replace a single Panther. Every exploded tank in Normandy had a replacement already steaming across the Atlantic. The German High Command understood numbers. They understood logistics. But they had never imagined a nation capable of producing 30 Shermans for every Panther. Back in Michigan, the factory whistle blew. A new shift stepped onto the floor. Thousands more workers in fresh uniforms. The lights stayed on. The machines kept humming. The conveyor belts rolled forward without pause. Because this was how America fought. Not with elite units alone. Not with exotic weapons alone. But with volume. With speed. With an industrial machine so massive that it bent the war in its direction. And somewhere in France, watching Shermans crawl across the horizon like an unending tide, Oberst Reimann would soon report to headquarters a simple truth, one that chilled the German general staff to the bone. The Americans are not running out. August 14, 1944. Near Falaise, France. A thin haze settled over the fields, carrying the distant rumble of artillery as the German front buckled under relentless Allied pressure. Inside a makeshift command post, a ruined farmhouse with half its roof blown away, Oberst Wilhelm Reimann hunched over a torn map spread across a wooden crate. Rain dripped through cracks overhead. The building trembled with every distant explosion. Lantern light flickered across Reimann's face as he scanned a report clutched in his hand. It was the third report of the morning, and the ninth in 2 days. Each one said the same thing. Shermans, more Shermans, always more Shermans. A young signals officer rushed in, boots splattered with mud. Herr Oberst, 2 Panther companies report total loss of vehicles south of Trun. They claim, he hesitated. Spit out, Reimann snapped. They claim American armor was replaced on the field within 24 hours. Reimann looked up slowly, his expression going hollow. That's impossible, he murmured. But the officer only swallowed and nodded. Sir, they insist it was the same units they engaged the day before. Reimann stepped out of the farmhouse into the morning mist. Across the valley, the wreckage of German armor lay scattered like broken teeth. Burned-out Panthers, cracked Stu GS, shattered half-tracks. Every one of them irreplaceable within weeks, sometimes months. Mechanics crawled over the hulks, desperately stripping usable parts. Meanwhile, beyond the smoke, the silhouettes of Shermans rolled forward, unscarred, factory-fresh, their engines humming in steady unison. A line of them. 10? 20? No, more. He raised his field binoculars. They kept coming. He lowered them, breathing sharply as if the sight had punched him in the chest. A major approached, saluting stiffly. We can hold for perhaps one more day. Herr Oberst. Reimann didn't answer. He pointed to the horizon. What do you see? He asked. The major followed his gesture. American armor, advancing with infantry support. Not armor, Reimann said quietly. Production? The major frowned. Sir, Reimann knelt beside the charred remains of a Panther turret. He brushed the soot from the armor plate with the back of his glove. This machine took 6 months to build, he said. 6 months. And when it burns, Germany loses another half year. He pointed again toward the Shermans. Those take days, perhaps hours. And when one burns, another already exists. Americans build them the way we build typewriters. The major was silent. Reimann stood, his voice tightening. I have commanded armor since Poland. I know the strengths of our machines. But I also know war. And war is numbers, fuel, logistics. No commander wins by destroying tanks faster than the enemy can replace them. He exhaled shakily. And they replaced them faster than we could destroy them. A distant thunder rolled across the fields as another wave of Allied artillery began its drumfire. Dust shook loose from the farmhouse walls. German soldiers scrambled to prepare their retreat positions. As Reimann watched the waves of Shermans advancing like a steel tide, he finally understood what the reports, the losses, and the worsening shortages had been trying to tell him for weeks. This wasn't the collapse of a single front. It was a collapse of the German war machine itself, not through superior tactics alone, not through better armor, but through an enemy whose factories were fighting harder than any division Germany could field. Ryman lowered his binoculars and whispered to no one, "We are outmatched not in battle but in time." August 18th, 1944, south of Argentan, France. The sky was a dull gray blanket, heavy with smoke drifting from the battles raging along the Falaise pocket. Roads at once bustled with columns of panzers were now choked with refugees, wounded soldiers, and the twisted remains of blown-out vehicles. A Panther off. G sat disabled in a shallow ditch. One track snapped, its engine silent. A crewman, Gefreiter Ernst Wolf, leaned against the hull, his uniform smudged with grease and blackened soot. His hands trembled as he wiped his face. He had spent the last 6 hours trying to repair the track. He had failed. Inside the tank, his commander, Lieutenant Victor Hallman, slammed the hatch open and climbed out. His brow glistened with sweat. "Ernst, leave it," he said quietly. "Command, order a full withdrawal to Chambois. We move on foot." But the Panther... Wolf stopped when he saw Hallman's expression. Hallman brushed his hand across the armor of the Panther. Their Panther, the one that had carried them from Kharkov to Normandy. The metal was warm, scarred by battle, a machine they kept running through ice, mud, and fire. "We're not getting another," Hallman whispered. "Not this year. Not at all, if the rumors are true." He stepped back, looking down the road. A quarter-mile away, a column of American armor approached. Sherman's half-tracks, and tank destroyers advancing in steady formation. Their engines purred like a heartbeat. Fresh paint, fresh treads, fresh crews. Wolf stared. "How many do they have?" Hallman didn't answer immediately. He counted 10, 15, 20, then he stopped counting. Behind the first wave, through the haze, more shapes appeared. Another armored column moving up to relieve the first. Then the rumble of an additional battalion following them. It was endless. The ground vibrated with their movement. Each passing minute brought more silhouettes into view. Hallman swallowed hard. "They're not even slowing down." Wolf looked at him. "Lieutenant, if we had Panthers like this many, do you think?" "No," Hallman cut in. "Not even then. We could never build them this fast." A mortar blast thundered nearby, shaking loose debris from the trees. German soldiers sprinted past the two men, some carrying rifles, others dragging ammunition crates. An exhausted medic shouted for help as he struggled to load wounded men onto a truck with a smoking engine. The entire German line looked like it was collapsing in slow motion. Hallman took a deep breath. "I used to think the war would be decided by the best tank," he said, his voice low. "The most armor, the strongest gun, the longest range." He looked again at the seemingly endless waves of Shermans pushing forward with mechanical confidence. But this is something else. Far behind American lines, cargo trucks unloaded spare parts, fuel drums, fresh motors. Recovery crews hauled damaged Shermans away for repair, while new ones rolled out of landing ships. It was an armor ecosystem, self-sustaining, overwhelming, impossible for Germany to match. A sudden roar grew louder overhead. 2 P-47 Thunderbolts swooped in low, engines howling, rocket trails slicing through the air. Hallman grabbed Wolf by the collar and pulled him down just as explosions tore open the road behind them. Dirt rained over their helmets. A Panther in the distance burst into flame. When the smoke cleared, Hallman lifted his head. The Shermans hadn't stopped. They continued forward, firing, maneuvering, replacing losses in minutes with machines that looked like they just rolled off the factory floor. It hit him in a single crushing realization. Germany wasn't losing because its crews were outmatched. It was losing because its industry was already dead. Wolf stared at the advancing wall of tanks, his voice barely audible. "Lieutenant, what do we do?" Hallman stood slowly, slinging his MP-40 over his shoulder. "We survive," he said, "because that's all that's left for us now." Behind them, another Panther burned. Ahead of them, more Shermans arrived. The end of the German armored corps wasn't dramatic. It was mathematical. And the math said Germany simply couldn't keep up. August 20th, 1944. Normandy, France. The fields around Falaise were quiet now. Quiet except for the distant rumble of engines and the low, constant thrum of tank tracks pressing over mud, rubble, and broken roads. Smoke rose from shattered villages like black banners, marking the path of retreat for the German forces. Panzer crews moved like shadows, exhausted, mud-caked, and terrified, as the Allied tide rolled ever onward. Oberst Ryman, his face streaked with dirt and ash, leaned against a crumbling wall. He surveyed what remained of his command. Scattered armor, exhausted infantry, and the hollow eyes of men who had watched their machines burn faster than they could count. "Sir," a young lieutenant said, his voice trembling, "the Americans have replaced every tank we've destroyed this morning, and another column is moving up behind them." Ryman nodded, too tired to speak. He had seen the factories and intelligence reports. He had counted the replacement tanks in the field, the endless waves of olive drab rolling forward. It was no longer a question of tactics or bravery. It was numbers. It was production. It was America itself at war. A Sherman rolled past a ruined wall, turrets swiveling, tracks churning mud, crew alert and efficient. Behind it, another followed, and another, and another. The column stretched as far as Ryman could see, machines arriving faster than his men could destroy them. "Every time we knock one out," he whispered to himself, 10 more are already coming." The wind carried the smell of diesel and scorched metal. It was a smell that would haunt the German commanders for the rest of the war. Not the smell of defeat, but the realization that the war was no longer fought on battlefields alone. It was fought in factories, in assembly lines in cities thousands of miles away, where Americans welded, riveted, and tested each Sherman with the precision and speed of an unstoppable machine. Ryman looked at his officers and men, their faces lined with fatigue and disbelief. They were veterans of campaigns across Europe, Africa, and the Eastern Front. Yet nothing had prepared them for this. This was not a loss due to courage or skill. This was a loss imposed by numbers, efficiency, and relentless production. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the valley. Explosions in the distance lit the smoke in brief flashes, revealing the unstoppable march of the Sherman battalions. Ryman felt the weight of the truth settle fully in his chest. Germany could not outfight, outgun, or outmaneuver this force. It could only hope to survive, delay, and retreat. He took a deep breath, the dust and smoke filling his lungs. Around him, his men did the same, silently acknowledging the fact that the war had shifted. The battlefield had changed from tactical engagements to industrial supremacy. The Shermans rolling endlessly toward them were not just tanks. They were the embodiment of an entire nation's will, its factories, and its capacity to endure. Ryman turned away from the horizon and gave the order, "Retreat. Preserve what we can. Live to fight another day." Outside, the Sherman columns continued forward. They did not slow. They did not hesitate. For the men of the German Armored Corps, this was the moment the tide could not be stopped. And somewhere in the heart of America, the factories kept rolling, the assembly lines humming, and another wave of tanks prepared to arrive on European shores. Faster than any could destroy them. The war had entered a new phase, and the Germans understood, with sinking hearts, that the victory they had hoped to secure through tactics and valor alone was slipping through their fingers. Steel, speed, and production had become the ultimate weapon, and the Shermans would keep coming.